Welcome to the 13th grade. Let's make you rich. All right, guys. So welcome back to the 13th grade. Up until this point, we've covered just a lot of kind of the basics. Just want to recap a little bit and go back into just sort of our last lesson, just in case you're not going back to these, and it's been a couple of days. I want to review with you again why we created this course, and let's just review one or two slides from the previous lesson. Mainly, the main concepts of that is what you make, your income that you have coming in each month does not necessarily guarantee you that you will be financially healthy, financially stable, or that you will be on a projection of building even generational wealth, which is, I would say, is probably the core of this particular course, is to create generational wealth and not just be financially coping or just to get by. Going back to the slide, those that listed themselves as making less than 60,000 actually listed themselves as being financially healthy. And remember, the definition of financially healthy per the study was your ability to basically pay all your bills on time. You're just kind of getting by paycheck to paycheck, and you might have a couple of dollars saved for retirement. If you remember, the money that people had saved for retirement was completely not correct as far as what would sustain them, but to their perception, they had some money saved. On the flip side to that, there were individuals that were making $100,000 or more that still listed themselves as financially coping or financially vulnerable. And in those categories, those individuals were paying some of their bills on time, not necessarily all of them. They were taking out debt to get by. They were borrowing from friends to get by. Maybe they were selling a couple of things, picking up second jobs, whatever it is. So there are individuals out there that are making less than 60,000 that are able to pay all of their bills. And there are people that are making 100,000 and above that are able to or are unable to pay all of their bills. So if you are in a current state right now and you're thinking to yourself, and I gave you an example of my own journey, but if you're thinking to yourself like, oh, I'm making $40,000 a year, man, if I could just get an extra grand a month, like I would really be set up and I would be, in a really great financial spot. Statistics show that's not necessarily the case. And again, from my personal experience, I can tell you that's not necessarily always the case. On a side note, one thing that is not in the stats, and it doesn't talk at all, but it doesn't necessarily talk about age in this particular study, or where these people are at different points of their life. You could imagine if you were making $40,000 a year, and let's say you were just in college, that might be okay, and you might be financially healthy. In addition to that, if you're making maybe $120,000 a year, but you have, a husband, a wife, and 3 kids, and you're paying for college or something like that, you could find yourself struggling. So we won't discount the fact that the age isn't really covered here, but still, I think is a really good study there that shows you, that again, money is not necessarily everything when it comes to financial health. So again, why we created this course is that, even if regardless of the amount of money that you make, it really doesn't matter. It really doesn't determine your financial health. So the question is then, if income isn't necessarily guarantee you financial health, then what does? And of course, it's your education. And this was the really big eye-opening for me. And this slide is simple. It's about, I don't know, a tenth of the books that I've read. Once in my journey, when I was paired up with a mentor that really began to sort of open my eyes to how money works, I realized that there was just so much information that I didn't know that I needed to know. And I went on this path of reading and consuming every single piece of information that I could. And of course, as you read more, things started to connect the dots. So I have this south slide here, and what I'll say to you is this was my timeline. And ladies and gentlemen, this is probably going to be your timeline. This course is designed to be to kind of follow this kind of idea. We are going to be covering a lot of information, a lot of basic information. How to do this, how to do that, how to do this, how to do that. You kind of have to know all of that information. And then as you know it, then we start to say, okay, now let's apply this principle with this principle, and that principle with that principle. And as you start to see how those principles kind of stack together or layered into one another, that's what creates generational wealth. Um, and so the idea here is that you got to learn a lot. And as you learn it, and eventually at a certain point in time, you get to this threshold where you're like, oh, so that connects to this, and this connects to that, and that connects to this. And if I put those things together, the sum of the parts is better than just the parts themselves, right? And so that's where your trajectory really starts to go up as far as your knowledge. Knowledge isn't just knowing about one thing or two things or three things or five things. It's about knowing those five things, probably an expertise in at least one of those, and then how the combination of all of that, the sum of all of those parts, in me is leads to something that's a lot more meaningful. Interesting enough, this is also the timeline of how income works, and I think the reason part of that is sort of twofold. In most cases, if you're just starting to save, it can take a very, very long period of time until you have enough meaningful amount of saved and invested where those investments are giving you a return on investment that returning on investment is meaningful for you. An example to that is just the most simplest way. If you put $100 into an account and you get a 10% return on that, you're making $10 a year. And for the most part, you're probably like, yeah, who cares about that? However, if you put $100,000 into an account, into an investment account, and you're making 10% a year on it, well, now you're making $10,000, or I'm sorry, $100,000 into an account, 10% a year. Now you're making $10,000 a year. That extra $10,000 can be very, very meaningful. However, if you don't spend that and you continue to go along that way, once you reach $1 million saved, then you're talking about $100,000 potentially a year that you're earning in just sort of free income. So a lot of times because of that, when you hear, well, the rich is getting richer or the poor is getting poorer, more focused on the rich is getting richer, the reason why that ends up happening is because a lot of individuals that go this pathway, like save and invest and save and invest, and they're kind of living this frugal life, they get used to it. They're used to kind of just making their money, putting their money to work. They kind of approach, see money completely different as we talked about. And as they do that, they accumulate, $1 million, $2 million, $3 million in the account. And, you get to a point where you have, let's say, 500 million or $5 million in a, investment account, which wouldn't be, completely out of the question based on what you'll see sort of as we end up into this course. That $5 million at a 10% return is, $500,000 a year. And so if you're sort of used to living off of like maybe 80,000, 90,000, or 100,000, and you kind of do that $500,000, even you could withdraw it and use it to pay for your living expenses. You end up saving, maybe 300 of it. But then the next year you have another 500,000, but you only use a little bit. And so the money that you're making from your money ends up growing exponentially, and you don't really spend it all. So it just kind of keeps compounding and compounding and compounding. Because you have that additional funds, and because you're not worried about maybe losing a little bit of money and not being able to pay for your living expenses or destroying your retirement, you can then start to take some of that money and put it into other vehicles, more risky businesses. You can purchase businesses, you can make acquisitions, and then those can tend to feed you even more income, and it just kind of keeps snowballing. It's not necessarily the idea that someone's going to work a lot, they're going to have a bunch of employees, and then they make money, and then they're taking more money, or they're taking a bigger percentage over whatever's being produced. They kind of get the same percentage of over the course of a period of time, but that percentage that amount gets larger. Not the percentage gets larger, but the amount gets larger because they have so much more invested. And so the idea is, your knowledge, usually you just kind of come along, you learn a bunch of stuff, and then things start to click, and then you start to exponentially, learn a lot. And then as you can kind of connect the dots, you become more valuable. That can relate to higher salaries, blah, blah, blah. And the same thing with your money, it kind of sits and it doesn't really do anything for a very, very long period of time. And then all of a sudden, you get this huge curve. A different way of saying this, and this is the idea, and what we're trying to do with this course is to do something called compressing time. And so I want to talk about your knowledge a little bit. When I talk about compressing time, what I'm saying to you is the average individual, let's just say average American, their normal path and their normal journey throughout life is going to be, they're going to go to high school, say that's going to be up to 18 years old. They're going to graduate high school, and then in a lot of cases, you're going to go to some type of college, or vocational school. Maybe it's a 2-year college, maybe it's a 4-year college, 8 years. It doesn't really matter. But you're going to go to some additional higher education. Through that education, let's say you go another 4 years, you're 22 years old, you then graduate, and then you enter into sort of like an entry level position at whatever it is that you're doing. Imagine if you got, just a business degree for a college, and then you end up going to work for some, I don't know, some business, some small business, big business, it doesn't really matter. And you started that at the age of, I don't know, 24, 25 years old, right out of college. To begin with, you're not really worth anything. You're just learning. You've got a lot of book smarts. You've done a lot of courses, and you've kind of done the rigor of that. You maybe know a couple of principles, but you've never actually applied those principles. And so, as you go to an entry level, for the most part, if you're a hard worker, if you're applying yourself, if you're doing all those things, then oftentimes, like you're just going to kind of get along for a couple of years. You're not going to get a lot of raises. You're probably in an entry level position. Let's call it just your representative or maybe your manager or something like that. However, as you get experience, maybe you go to different departments. Maybe you leave one job and go to another job. Maybe you do these different things. After you're in a position for 8, 10 years, you're in your mid 30s and things like that. Companies know, and you should know, just because of the value that you're producing when you're at work, you should start to display a more complex understanding of whatever it is that you're trying to do. So, if you are like in a sales organization, you really understand sales. Maybe now you understand marketing. You understand how the pieces to go, and that is after a few years being in a particular position, is where you can start to get increases as far as maybe you go from representative to manager. If you're a manager, maybe you go to like a senior manager, a director, and a director to vice president, and so forth. Your knowledge and your experience allows you to gain higher positions. If you go into entry level and you don't do anything and you just kind of clock in, you clock out, you never try to do anything different, and you kind of just don't ever try to expand yourself, you never try to do anything extra, and you just maintain that experience level, you'll never make it to a higher position. And there's countless people that obviously do that. However, a lot of people, and hopefully the people watching this course, are going to go in, and it's like I did when I went into sales early on. I was like, I don't want to know just about sales. I want to know about everything that sales touches. I want to know about the marketing department. I want to know what the website looks like that the marketing department is running. I want to know the content that's on the website. I want to see what the customer's seeing before they get to me. I want to see what the lead is. I want to see the customer experience after I sell that particular product. I want to know everything. And then I went to my managers or my bosses, and I went to them and I said, hey, how did you get to the next level? What are the skills that I need to get to the next level? And they would say, you need to do these 3 things or whatever. And I would go and I'd read all these books and do all these types of things. So constantly trying to earn your skills. If you do that, you'll get to, vice president, and then you can go president, and you can get to really, really great moves. The point is that there's a process of both education and then sort of practice. And if you take the combination of your education and your practice and you mold that together, you can get some pretty good experiences. You start to connect the dots, how things relate. You become more valuable to a company. You get increases and you make more money. This is why most CEOs, VPs, things like that in traditional companies are people in their 40s, 50s, and the higher level is really like in the 60s. You may only be in a position of, vice president, president, CEO, chairman, into your 50s and 60s, even if you're hustling and doing everything correctly, because those companies, even when they're considering somebody, they're like, I need to see at least 10, 15, 20 years of experience before I'll even consider it, even if you have the education. Where success happens, and this is very important because this is all going to tie into how we make income. Where success happens is how quickly you can get to compressing time. When I say compressing time, is compressing the period as far as your age to when your education and what you apply becomes meaningful to something you can earn more money. Imagine the entry level employee that never opens a extra book, never goes to a seminar, doesn't really look at trainings, doesn't really just does the bare minimum. They're going to be at the same level all the time. Now take the exact same employee that works, 40 hours a week, but maybe spends a little extra time, an extra hour every single day to learn different departments, and maybe spend some time in the weekend, reading different books about their particular area, and really dives in and spends maybe, 20, 25 hours extra a week, 40 actually doing the job, but 25 getting additional education, whatever. How much more valuable and how quickly are they going to develop the skills that will be more valuable to an employer? This is actually exactly how financial building and financial wealth works. And so, what happens, it's similar but different in a way. What happens for most people, okay, is they graduate high school, you get into college, they get into college, and then they're like, well, now that I got a degree, I'm making a little bit more money. So because of that, I know I'm going to reward myself and I'm going to go buy a nice car. I'm going to go on some vacations, and they're just sort of like earning and consuming and earning and consuming. And then they understand, they're like, well, wait a minute. I really want to buy a house. And it really is that at that particular point that they're like, well, in order to buy a house, oh, wait a minute, I need a good credit score. So I guess I should have been doing that, but that's okay. I'll get it cleaned up, and I'm gonna try to go to a debt credit repair company. And I made some mistakes in high school, or I made some mistakes in college rather. But I'll get that cleaned up, and so they get into a mortgage, but the rate's really not that great, because they just meet it because they weren't even thinking about credit because they're just now coming into that, and so they have a little bit of income, and so they squeeze into because they heard you shouldn't rent, you should always buy because buying is if they're renting is throwing your money away, and buying you can build equity, and that's how you become a million, all that kind of stuff. So they force themselves into so a mortgage payment that they can just afford. And at the same time, with that mortgage payment, they're also looking and going, "Hey, I also have that BMW payment because they deserve it." And they've already developed a lifestyle where they get their nails done, or they're in a private gym, or whatever the lifestyle is that they're starting to reward themselves. And then they go through life, and then they realize that a kid's on the way, and hey, let's start a family because you should graduate high school, go to college, graduate, start working, get established in your career, find somebody, get married, have two and a half children, right? Work a bunch, get promoted, save up for retirement, die. But, you know, in their 20s, they didn't really have a whole lot of money because they're in college. And then right out of college, well, they wanted to reward themselves again. So they bought themselves a car, and then they had to get a house because they're getting married. And if you're married, you got to have a house. And then a kid comes along because that's what happens when people get married. So now they have a kid, and there's an added expense. And so in the beginning, they're just starting to pay for all of that is raising children, and now you have to have school because maybe both parents work, and so all of that expense. And at this point in time, they're not thinking about retirement. They're not thinking about anything else. They're just trying to get by because they're already tied to this mortgage. They're already tied to these vehicle loans, and they're already tied to their lifestyle that they've developed. And now there's this new kid, and that's an expense. And then their kid starts to get older. And before you know it, your 3, 4, 5-year old is 10, is 10, 12, 13, 14. They're going to high school, and there's already discussions talking about college. And you're thinking to yourself, well, your kid, it's got to go to college. You want to provide that for you. And maybe you didn't have that, so you want to do that. So then you start to save up for that. And now eventually the kids go to college. And maybe at that same time, you are connecting the dots at work, and you are making a little bit more money at work. And so you're thinking, well, I can do this, right? Like I can save, I can pay for the mortgage. I can pay for the car. I got the expenses. The kids are in soccer. Now they want to go to college, and that's going to be another $20,000 a year. So you start saving for that. the kids go to school. It's now, you're 24, 20 years in, from, getting married and having a kids and all that, 30. So now you're in your 50s, you're in 50, 55. Kids have graduated. You no longer have to pay to college. Maybe your mortgage is finally start to get paid down a little bit. So now you start to own that home. You probably still traded your cars over every couple of times, but you're 55 and you realize, oh no, wait a minute. I'm going to be retired. Like I want to retire when I'm 65 and I don't have anything saved. And so by not focusing on that early on, because you're not even thinking it, because our society and our institutions don't teach us financial literacy, you're thinking you're thinking all the time wasn't about your retirement and how you're ever going to get out of this rat race of 9 to 5. Instead, you've been just trying to survive, right? And that's what most of us do. And so what happens is you end up waking up at 55 and you're like, I got 10 years to save. And you start saving. And as you start saving money, you're putting a little bit away, and maybe you're financially healthy because now you're making a buck 20 at your job because you've done a lot of things. So you're making a buck 20, but you're still financially vulnerable because you got the student loans, you still got the mortgage, you still got the car, and you only have the $106,000 saved. See how that ties together. That's how you can make $120,000 and have nothing saved for retirement. If you are in your 20s right now, and I said to you earlier, and I said, hey, if you make $120,000, you can end up in retirement and not have any money. The reason why you might be like, how is that possible? Is because one, you're in this course, so you're already thinking about financial literacy. But for the most people, they're not thinking about that. And so the 120,000 ends up later, but because they've sort of spent all of their money on life and things without consideration of it, you can end up with a really great salary later in life. And maybe your house is paid off a little bit. Maybe you had to refinance the house and take some equity out to pay for the college bills, but you never really started to think about anything along those lines. And so you find yourself at the edge or closer to retirement without necessarily all the money. So the problem is this is the track for most Americans. So what are we trying to do here? We're trying to compress time. And so what I'm doing, and I'll say to you, is that you will apply the principles in this course at some point in time in your life. It just depends on where. You can apply them early on in your life and ensure that your retirement is set up, or you will apply them later in your life when you realize, oh crap, I have no time. And then you're going to try to play catch up, which I'll tell you, you're not going to have necessarily the time to play catch up the way you would like it. So we're trying to compress the time in that what I want you to be thinking about, and this is why you're going to be thinking differently about everyone, unlike anyone else that's in your circle of influence, is we want you to start thinking about retirement and not working and financial security and planning for a house and how you should buy a house and how you should plan for college and how you should early on. So that's a center focus. So then you can make the right decisions in your 20s and whatever. So that when you reach that particular point, it's already planned out. And so when you reach 65, so we're trying to compress your time of knowledge. You can go your entire life from when you're 20 to 65. And if you went to most 65-year-olds, and I would encourage you to try this, go to most 65-year-olds and say, what would you have done differently in your 20s than right now? And they're about to give you all the things that we covered in this course. And that's the idea. And I think I covered that in a previous video. There's nothing new here. The principles that have made people successful have not changed. We simply don't teach them. Most people find out about it very late in life. And then they go, oh crap, now I'm going to start to apply those principles. And in most cases, it's too late. Because if you want to retire at 65, but you've only started thinking about that retirement at 55, it's just simply not enough time. So I will say to you, and I love this slide. For most of you, so some of you, you're not even here. You've already left the first couple of videos completely said, this is too boring for me, which is perfectly fine because I get it. 75% of you, okay, on that curve of knowledge and on that curve of income will give up within the first couple. Already, we've gone through a couple of videos here, and I understand it's dry and it's boring information because finance is just dry and boring. 75% of you will give up before you ever get started. You'll never get the education right now, and so you'll just never do it, and you'll just struggle your entire life. It's unfortunate. It is what it is. A lot of you will get lots of education and maybe go through all the course, but never really start to apply it. And they'll just you just kind of give up right at the end. Like you'll work, you'll do all the things, and you apply it, but then you're just not really going to see the results quite yet because it takes time to build into that curve. And you'll be like, I don't know why I'm doing all this. It just seems like a waste. I'm still like it just and then you just give up. 1%, 1% of even the people listening to this course, maybe 3%, will actually make it all the way. Not because you can't, but because the peer pressure, the dryness, the education, you'll go, you know what? I just can't do this. Like you'll just be like, I'm out. I'm tapping out. I'm not going to do it. I can't keep feeding this particular thing. It's not working. It's not making a change. I want to show you a couple of CEOs in where they started in their journey. And this is kind of the idea of compressing time, right? Ray Kroc started McDonald's at 52 years old. Mary Kay, you probably have heard that, started at 41. Co-founder of Intel, 41. Martha Stewart, 40s. Sam Walton, 44. Even if you go back and you look at Warren Buffett and where he started where things really start to put together, where he really started to become into his wealth, it's later on in life. The point is that you have to do stuff in your 20s, do stuff in your 30s, not get a whole lot of result, but then in your 40s and 50s, and in your 40s and 50s is where you go, holy crap, all this worked, lights out, I can retire, I'm out. And you can go travel the world, do whatever you want, whenever you want. You can do things earlier if you hustle. The point is why I'm showing you this slide is because there's lots of people and they don't make it in their 20s and they don't make it in their 30s, but your 40s and 50s should be set up with complete and utter abundance if you do those right things. And this is a good example of that. Another slide I want to show you because this is alternative, different from the curve. When you're going through and you're applying the principles in this particular course, it is going to feel like an uphill battle. And when people say, hey, the richer get richer, the poor get poor, again, more emphasis on the richer get richer, what happens is the wealthy, the people that make it, work, bust their ass. I mean, they're pushing a rock up a hill and it's hard and it's difficult. And it's like push and push and push and push and push and push. But at a certain point, and it's this point, when your money starts making you money, and that money that you make can pay for your lifestyle, when you can retire, but that money is making more money than you need necessarily to live, that is where it's downhill from there. That is where you get that rock over the ledge and everything becomes so much easier. You're going to need to work for 5, 10, 15 years in this battle that's going to just seem brutal. While all your friends are doing all these other things that seem really great, racking up their credit cards, getting tons of debt. Once you reach a certain pinnacle, your life is going to become significantly easier. It's going to be like everything just opened up to you. You potentially get more money coming in than you could possibly imagine to spend. You'll be able to do whatever you want, whenever you want, whenever you want. You'll reach your state of fire. And there will literally be no stopping to you because it is just what it is. It's the math. At that exact time is when your friends are going to be thinking, oh, I've kind of had a good life. It's been okay. I'm kind of financially coping. I'm living paycheck to paycheck, but it's really getting hard right now because the kids have to go to college. I don't have anything saved for retirement. The house needs work on it. And eventually their spending and the amount of debt they can take out reaches the cap and they get in a certain point. That's where bankruptcy happens. Most of those people will work their entire life and they'll be working as baggers at Walmart in their 60s and 70s because they just simply can't make ends meet. Most people think that wealthy individuals grow up like this. Okay. They grow up from wealthy families. They get millions of dollars handed to them, and they just continue on that wealth. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't tell you how far from the truth that is. The most millionaires are self-made millionaires, and they're made in the first generation. This is me growing up. Okay. Um, when I was young, we didn't have much of any money. My father worked two jobs. My mother worked two jobs. For us, what we ate on a regular basis, forget Uber Eats, forget DoorDash, forget, oh, I gotta just buy stuff at Publix and bring it home. I can't afford any of those things. If you think of the level of for people right now, most people are like, well, I should be able to do this. I should be able to do that. A big meal for me when I was young was noodles and ketchup. Okay. Because we didn't have tomato sauce, but we had ketchup. So we would have a box of, I think it was, 90 cents or whatever, 10, a dollar to get a box of pasta. And we would get some ketchup. We would just boil the noodles and add ketchup on it. And that's what I ate for several dinners. If we were like really, really fortunate, we would add grated Parmesan cheese. So we would have noodles, butter, and Parmesan cheese. That's how I grew up. I grew up with not getting necessarily new clothes every single year for school. Nevertheless, kids these days, they get new stuff all the time. I wore hand-me-downs. I wore stuff that didn't fit. I probably had the same, pair of shoes. I'm sure your parents, if you're young, your parents have probably told you this, whatever. All the things. We lived dirt poor. And yet somehow today, I've been able to generate a portfolio. And actually, just sitting here looking at this because I built this in, what was it, early 2020s when I started creating these slides. 20 properties, four short-term rentals were, I don't know, double this at this particular time. I have, boats, I have jet skis, I have, $100,000 work truck. We drive, we have another, Tesla Model X. We've added actually to this, we have a BMW X7. I actually had the Porsche GT3 RS here. I traded that in for the 488, which I mentioned. The point is that I've moved from nothing to something in a very short period of time. And most of these principles I learned early on in my 30s. And currently, as I record this today, I'm in my early 40s. So within 10 years, completely transformed my life. The reason why is there are two ways that you will realize or to create generational wealth. There's two ways to create money. There's two ways to secure your financial future. One is a hard way. Okay. And that is, imagine taking a spoon and trying to carve out this particular wood. You could do it. It's going to take you forever. And then there's the second way, which is an axe, which is obviously the most useful. The wealthy, the people that are sticking through this course, okay, the people that will make it, the 1%, the only difference is we're both chopping wood. We're using an axe where the average individual is using a spoon. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the difference. The difference between those that are make it and those that don't make it is simple. We don't give up here. We don't give up ever. We stick with it. So what I would say to you before we go into the course, when we start talking about things, I really think there's a decision that you need to make. First, if you're unwilling and unable to do the things that you need to do, which is going to be contrast to anything you've ever learned, approach money, see it, act it completely different. If you're not willing to do that, if you're not going to be willing to sort of, sacrifice and maybe a little bit of frugal and not buy the next thing, if you're not willing to maybe put in not 40 hours a week, but maybe a little extra time to increase your income to set yourself up properly, and you're not able to do that for, 5, 6, 7, 10 years and kind of really commit to that, if you're not willing to forego in partying and hanging out and doing all those types of things, if you're not willing to say, I'm going to find a partner in my life that is like-minded with me, if you're just going to try to be here to learn how to get rich quick, you don't need to delete it. You're part of the 75%. You're never going to make it past the first 25% of this course. Just give up. It's just save your time. You might as well go out and have fun, go party, have a drink, whatever it is. Just stop now. If you are a person that thinks, no, I do want to learn it. I do want to do it. I do want to do it. But you're just kind of going to be able to do it. And you're just like, oh, I'll stick with the course, but I'm not really going to apply. If you've done things like joined a workout program and you stuck with it for like 30 days and then you just never completed it, you also might be one of those people that you may not want to go forward, to be quite honest with you, because I also don't want you to go through the course, learn everything. And if you're not going to apply it, what was the point of sitting and listening to me talk for the last for the next 6 months or for however long it takes you to get through all this? It doesn't make sense. In order to make it, you need to dedicate from this part forward of your life that you're going to read or consume all of the books and things that I'm going to recommend that you consume. Because while we're talking about large concepts here, you need to go expand yourself on all of those. You need to be able to sort of commit yourself that you are going to work yourself and put in the work to generate the income that you need to put into the investments that are going to be important for you. And that you are going to forego the consume lifestyle, that you aren't going to go and just everything that you earn, you're going to consume it, because if you do that, again, you'll never have the money for investment. If you're willing to put in the work in education, if you're willing to put in the work in getting income, if you're willing to put in the less work actually of not spending that, you will be set up for success. And if you can do that for 10 years, and you can commit to me for 10 years, you're going to do that. So from 22 to 32, from 25 to 35, from 30 to 40, as I did it, this course is for you. We will get you on a path of massive generational wealth. There's no question about it. The principles that have made people successful have not changed for generations. If you're willing to apply them in your life, you will be successful. If you don't, there's no reason to go forward. Delete, stop watching the course.